My name is Daniel Ward, and if you're hearing this, it means I've already done what I set out to do. This isn't a confession, it isn't an apology, it's a story about betrayal, loss, and the kind of revenge that rots your soul until nothing human is left. I was born and raised in a town called Hollowford, a place where nothing ever really happened, where people grew old in the same houses their grandparents had built, and where secrets had a way of clinging to the air like fog. My father worked at the lumber mill, my mother was a nurse, and I had one person I trusted more than anyone else in the world, Ethan Cole. Ethan and I had been inseparable since childhood. We rode bikes down the cracked back roads, stole cigarettes from his older brother, and swore we'd get out of Hollowford together one day. He was the kind of friend who knew what you were thinking before you said it, the kind you thought you'd grow old with. But life doesn't keep promises. I met Anna in my mid-20s. She was everything the town wasn't, bright, alive, full of dreams. She worked at the small bookstore on Main Street, and the first time I saw her, she was arguing with a customer about some novel I hadn't even heard of. Her passion drew me in. Within months, I knew she was the one. Within a year, we were married, and Ethan was my best man. I thought life was perfect. I thought I had everything. But I wasn't paying attention. It started small. Missed calls, late nights, excuses that sounded reasonable at the time. Anna said she was working extra shifts. Ethan said he was helping his brother with construction. I believed them. Why wouldn't I? Trust was the backbone of my life. Then came the night everything cracked. I had left work early, a rare thing. The mill had shut down for maintenance, and I thought I'd surprise Anna. I bought flowers. I even thought of taking her to dinner. But when I opened our front door, I heard laughter upstairs. Her laughter. And his. I'll never forget the sound. I froze, my chest tightening, my hand shaking. At first I told myself it couldn't be what it sounded like. That's how denial works. It builds walls in your head to protect you from truths that can shatter everything. But when I climbed the stairs, when I pushed open that bedroom door, the walls came crashing down. There they were, my wife, my best friend, twisted together in the sheets I'd brought with my own money, in the house I'd built for us. Anna screamed. Ethan jumped up, stammering excuses, his face pale, his words hollow. But I didn't hear them. All I heard was the roar of blood in my ears, the thundering silence of something inside me breaking. I left without a word. If I had stayed another second, I might have killed them both right then and there. The days that followed were a blur. Anna begged me to listen, said it was a mistake, said it just happened. Ethan avoided me entirely. The town whispered. Hollowford wasn't big enough to hide scandal, and soon enough, everyone knew. I filed for divorce. Anna moved in with her sister. Ethan carried on as if nothing had happened. But me? I rotted. The thing about betrayal is, it doesn't just wound you, it rewrites you. It hollowed me out, filled me with something black and heavy. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces twisted in pleasure, their bodies tangled together. I wanted to forgive. I tried, but forgiveness is a lie we tell ourselves to avoid facing what we really want. And what I wanted was revenge. I started small, watching them, following Ethan after work, learning his routines. He still worked construction, still drank at Murphy's bar every Friday night, still stumbled home past midnight. Anna, she tried to avoid me, but I knew where she was. The bookstore, her sister's apartment, sometimes with Ethan, sometimes not. I didn't rush. Revenge isn't something you hurry. It's something you cook slow. Let it simmer until it's thick enough to choke on. And while I waited, I remembered something my father once told me when I was a boy. He'd caught me crying after some kids had bullied me, and he said, "Son, when someone cuts you deep, you've got two choices. You can bleed, or you can sharpen the knife they left in your back and return it." I chose the knife. The first step was rebuilding myself. I quit the mill, signed up for night classes, learned skills I never thought I'd need: electronics, locks, even first aid, things that seemed useless on their own but would become pieces of a larger puzzle. I worked out, put on muscle, trained my body until it could do what my mind demanded. 2 years passed. To Ethan and Anna, maybe I'd faded. Maybe I was just the ghost of a mistake they wanted to forget. But to me, every day was a step closer to justice. And then the opportunity came. One summer evening, I overheard Ethan bragging at Murphy's, his voice loud and sloppy from beer. He talked about a new job site on the edge of town, an old farmhouse they were renovating. Remote, no one around for miles. He laughed, said it was the perfect hideout. He didn't know I was sitting in the corner, nursing a drink, listening to every word. That night I walked home in silence, the dim street lights the only thing lighting my way, the plan already forming in my mind. It was time. I used to think revenge was a single act, one moment of violence, one night of blood, and then it would be over. But in truth, revenge is a season, a long, cold season, where every day is a preparation, every night is a rehearsal, and the silence between is heavier than death. For 2 years I lived in that season. Ethan and Anna didn't run off together like I expected. Maybe guilt kept them apart, maybe shame. She stayed with her sister, and he carried on with his job. People said they weren't even speaking anymore. But I didn't believe that. I knew the truth of people's hunger. Once you've tasted betrayal, it lingers. It waits in the blood. And I waited too. The farmhouse job was the break I'd prayed for. Old place, half collapsed, set deep in the woods where no neighbors would hear a scream. Ethan worked there 3 nights a week, overseeing the crew, hauling lumber and tools into the shell of the house. I knew his hours. I knew when he'd be alone. But I wasn't ready yet. Not for him, not for her. Before I'd touch them, I needed to master something harder, the art of silence. You see, a man who rushes into revenge becomes sloppy. He leaves evidence, makes mistakes, and in the end, his enemy laughs at him, even in death. I wanted no laughter. I wanted fear. I wanted Ethan to look into my eyes and understand every choice, every moment, every cut was deliberate. So I rehearsed. I practiced breaking locks on abandoned sheds, practiced cutting power lines, leaving rooms in suffocating darkness. I carried weights in a backpack to simulate dragging a body, built soundproof boxes in my garage to test how muffled a scream became when wrapped in duct tape. It sounds obsessive, doesn't it? But obsession is just another word for devotion. And I was devoted to my revenge. But the longer I prepared, the more I realized something. This wasn't just about Ethan. It was about Anna, too. For months after the divorce, I told myself she'd been manipulated, lured into weakness, that maybe Ethan had taken advantage of her loneliness. But the truth crept in slowly, like rot under a floorboard. You can't betray someone unless you choose to. She had chosen. She had looked me in the eyes for months, kissed me good night, told me she loved me, all while sneaking away to him.
Her betrayal cut deeper than his. He was my brother in spirit, but she had been my heart, and she had gutted it. So yes, my knife had two names etched into its handle. I started leaving little reminders for them, though they didn't know it was me. A broken photograph left on Anna's doorstep, the one of us smiling at our wedding, shards scattered on her welcome mat like glass teeth. A muddy boot print outside Ethan's truck, the tread matching the boots he'd given me years ago. An old note slipped into his mailbox, "You can't bury blood." I never signed my name, never revealed myself, but I wanted them to feel the shadow behind them. I wanted them to taste fear before they ever saw my face again. And they did. I saw it in the way Anna walked faster down Main Street, her eyes flicking over her shoulder. I saw it in the way Ethan drank harder at Murphy's, his jokes louder, his laughter hollower. Fear is a seed, and I had planted it deep. But fear alone wasn't enough. Revenge, real revenge, needs timing, it needs patience, and then it needs a spark. That spark came one October night. I was sitting in my truck across from Murphy's, watching through the rain-smeared windshield. Ethan stumbled out of the bar, drunker than I had ever seen him. He leaned against the wall, fumbled for a cigarette, then staggered into the alley. And he wasn't alone. Anna followed him. I'll never know if they planned to meet there or if it just happened. But when she pressed herself against him, when their mouths met in the sick orange glow of the street lamp, I knew. They hadn't stopped, not after the divorce, not after 2 years. They had kept feeding the fire, burning me alive in absentia. And in that moment, something inside me settled. The waiting was over.
I drove home in silence, the wipers smearing water across the glass, the hum of the engine the only sound. My hands didn't shake, my chest didn't tighten. No rage, no panic. Just clarity, sharp as a knife's edge.
I sat at my kitchen table, took out a notebook and began writing. Not a letter, not a confession, a list. The plan. 1. Lure Ethan to the farmhouse. 2. Separate him from Anna. 3. Break him down, piece by piece. 4. Make him confess. Make him remember every moment of betrayal. 5. End it. Then Anna. Simple, efficient, but not quick. No, quick would be mercy, and I wasn't in the business of mercy. The next weeks were a blur of preparation. I built what I needed in the farmhouse basement, chains bolted to the wall, a table fitted with straps, a set of tools I cleaned and sharpened until they gleamed in the lamplight. And in the silence of those nights, as the hammer echoed against concrete, I realized something strange. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't guilty. I was calm. Revenge had burned away the man I used to be, leaving only this, a craftsman. And Ethan was going to be my masterpiece. The night I chose was cold, the kind of cold that sinks into your bones. The farmhouse sat in silence under a sickle moon, the broken roof like a mouth missing teeth. I parked a mile away and walked, the crunch of dead leaves underfoot the only sound. I waited until his truck pulled up, until he climbed out with his flashlight muttering about the generator he'd come to check. Alone, just like I knew he'd be. My heart didn't pound, my hands didn't shake. I stepped from the shadows, the crowbar in my hand, and when he turned, I smiled. That was the first time he'd seen me in 2 years. His eyes widened, his mouth opened, but before a sound could escape, I swung. The crowbar met his skull with a dull thud. Not enough to kill, just enough to drop him. He crumpled like a sack of meat, the flashlight rolling into the dirt. I stood over him, breathing slow, watching the blood seep into the soil. Then I dragged him inside. The farmhouse swallowed us whole. The broken walls groaned as if the house itself knew what was about to happen. Down into the basement, into the room I'd prepared, where chains gleamed on the walls and tools gleamed on the table. I shackled him before he even stirred, and when his eyes finally opened, when he realized where he was, he whispered my name. "Daniel?" I leaned close. My voice was steady, calm, almost gentle. "It's been a long time, brother." Ethan woke slowly, like a man pulling himself out of a deep swamp. His head lolled, his breathing ragged. When he finally focused, he realized the chains weren't a dream. The iron cuffs clamped around his wrists and ankles, bolted tight to the stone wall of the farmhouse basement. His eyes darted around, wide with confusion, with terror. "Daniel, what the hell is this?" I didn't answer right away. I wanted him to sit in it, the damp stench of mildew, the faint drip of water in the corner, the flicker of the single bulb overhead. The silence was a weight pressing on him. I pulled a chair across the floor, the legs scraping loud against the concrete, and sat down in front of him. I folded my hands on my lap, like a teacher about to begin a lesson. "You know what this is," I said finally. His lips trembled, his eyes shining. "Look, I know things went bad between us, but—" I cut him off with a raised hand. "Bad." I leaned forward. "You stole my wife. You crawled into my bed when my back was turned. You betrayed me, Ethan. You didn't just cut me, you gutted me." He shook his head violently, the chains rattling. "It wasn't like that, Daniel. Listen, I loved her. I couldn't help it. We didn't mean to hurt you." The words poured out of him, frantic, desperate, and each one was a spark on the oil of my fury. I stood, pacing slowly before him, my footsteps echoing. "You loved her?" I repeated, tasting the words like poison. "My wife, my best friend. You loved her so much, you made me a fool in my own house." His eyes filled with tears. He pulled against the chains, the cuffs biting into his skin. "Please, man, just let me go. I'll leave town. I'll never see her again, I swear." I stopped pacing, turned to him. "Do you think this is about her?" My voice was low, steady, dangerous. "This isn't about her, Ethan. This is about you and me. What we were. What you threw away." I walked to the table in the corner. On it lay the tools, each one chosen, polished, arranged with care. A hammer, a pair of pliers, a blowtorch, knives of different lengths, their edges gleaming in the lamplight. I picked up the pliers, turning them slowly in my hands. Ethan's breath quickened. "Daniel," his words was barely a whisper. "Don't do this." I walked back to him, crouched down so we were eye to eye. "Oh, I'm gonna do this, but not because I want to hurt you." I smiled then, cold and joyless. "I want to understand you. I want to know what was worth throwing our lives away. And when I pulled every truth out of your throat, then I let you go." He swallowed hard, eyes darting between my face and the tool in my hand. "You're sick." "Maybe, but I'm free." The first scream came when I snapped his pinky finger like a dry twig. The pliers clamped, his bone cracked, and his howl shook the walls. I didn't shout, didn't curse. I just held his gaze, calm, steady, as he writhed against the chains. One finger for one lie. How many lies did you tell me, Ethan? He panted, sweat dripping down his face. It wasn't lies, I swear, Daniel. I didn't mean for it to happen. Another finger, another snap. His scream rose, hoarse, raw. You didn't mean for it to happen, I hissed. Then tell me, when did it start? Was it after the wedding? Before? It was after the wedding, I swear. She kissed me first, Daniel. Liar! My voice cracked the silence like a whip.
And the pliers snapped again.
Hours bled together. The bowl buzzed overhead, shadows twitching across the walls as I worked. Ethan sobbed, begged, cursed me, prayed. I broke him down slowly, methodically, until his words became rivers of confession. He told me everything, how long it had gone on, how many times in my house, in my bed, how they laughed about me sometimes, behind my back. Every word was a dagger twisted into my gut, but I kept listening, because this was the truth I had carved him open to find. And when his voice was hoarse, when his fingers dangled broken and bloody, I knelt beside him again. "Do you understand now?" I whispered. He lifted his swollen eyes to me, his lips trembling. "Daniel, please, kill me." I smiled. Not yet. I let him hang in silence then, leaving him chained while I sat back in my chair. I lit a cigarette, the smoke curling around us in the cold basement air. "You want to die," I said softly, "but death's too easy. Death doesn't balance the scales." He whimpered, shaking his head. "You're going to live long enough to see what comes next, long enough to face her, because Anna's part of this too. You didn't betray me alone, Ethan, and you're going to watch me take her apart the same way I've taken you." His eyes widened in horror. No, Daniel, don't." But I only leaned back, exhaling smoke, letting the silence choke him. That night I left him chained in the basement, his sobs echoing as I climbed the stairs. Outside the woods were dark, the moon hidden behind clouds. The air was sharp with frost, each breath a ghost before me. I walked back to my truck, calm as a priest after confession, because the next step was Anna. The night after Ethan broke, I didn't sleep. Sleep belonged to men with peace in their hearts, and mine had been carved out years ago. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with the lights off, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, staring at the pistol I'd laid out in front of me. It wasn't for me. It was for her. Anna. I knew where she'd be. She was nothing if not predictable. Tuesdays and Thursdays she worked late at the bookstore, closing up at 9, walking out with her jacket pulled tight against the autumn chill. Her sister would sometimes pick her up, sometimes not, but that night she walked alone. I trailed her from a distance, my headlights off, the old truck silent as a shadow down the back streets of Hollowford. She never looked over her shoulder. That had always been Anna's mistake. She believed the world was kind, that people were what they seemed. She had never learned to look for monsters in the dark. But I had. When she reached her sister's building, I cut the truck's engine. She fumbled with her keys at the door, yawning. That's when I stepped out of the shadows. Anna. Her head jerked up, her eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. For a moment she didn't move, just stood there, frozen, staring at me like a ghost had spoken her name. "Daniel," she whispered. I stepped closer, the pistol loose in my hand. It's been a long time. Her lips trembled. "What are you doing here?" I tilted my head, smiling faintly. "I think you know." I didn't drag her, didn't shout. I didn't need to. She came with me like a moth to a flame, her legs stiff, her breath shallow. Maybe part of her always knew this night would come. Maybe guilt had been her prison all along. We drove in silence, the road twisting deeper into the woods. The farmhouse loomed in the darkness, its roof gaping, its windows black. When I pulled up, she turned to me, panic rising. "Daniel, please!" I pressed the gun against her thigh, gentle as a lover's touch. "Out!" She obeyed. The basement smelled of blood and mildew. The bulb flickered, casting long shadows. Ethan hung from the chains, his head bowed, his body broken. But when Anna stepped into the room, he lifted his eyes and something like hope lit them. "Anna," he croaked. Her hands flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, Ethan!" She ran to him, but I caught her arm, yanking her back. "Not so fast." She turned to me then, her eyes wide, shining with terror. "Daniel, what are you doing?" I leaned closer, my voice calm, almost tender. "I gave him what he gave me. Honesty." I forced her into the chair opposite Ethan, bound her wrists with rope, tied her to the wood. She struggled, cried out, begged, but the ropes held. Now they were both here, both captives of the truth they had built together. I stood between them, my arms crossed, the silence heavy. "You two thought you could cut me out of my own life, thought you could rip my heart out and leave me to rot. But here we are, together again, just like old times." Anna shook her head violently, tears streaming. "We didn't mean—" "Don't," I snapped, my voice cracking like thunder. She flinched, her words choking back. "You didn't mean," I hissed. "You smiled in my face every day, Anna. You told me you loved me while you were crawling into his bed. You meant every goddamn second." Her face crumpled, sobs racking her. "I was lonely. Daniel, you were always working, always gone. I didn't know how to reach you." I laughed then, a sharp, broken sound. "So you reached for him." Behind me, Ethan sobbed too, his chains rattling. It was perfect. They were breaking, piece by piece. I stood, pacing slowly before them. "Do you know what I learned these past years?" I asked, my voice calm again. "That revenge isn't about rage. Rage fades. It burns out. No, revenge is about balance, about making sure the scales are even before you leave this world." Anna shook her head desperately. "Please, don't kill us." I smiled faintly. "Who said anything about killing?" I went to the table, picked up the knife, its edge gleaming. I turned it in my hand, watching the light dance. Then I walked back to her, crouched low, and set the blade against her cheek. She froze, breath hitching. "I want you both to feel what I felt, to know what it's like to have your soul cut open and left to bleed." Ethan thrashed against the chains. "Daniel, don't touch her. This is between us. Leave her out of it." I looked at him, smiling coldly. "But she's the reason we're here. She's the spark. Without her, none of this would have happened." Anna sobbed, shaking her head, the knife trembling against her skin. I was weak. I was stupid. Daniel, I loved you. I still—" The word snapped something in me. I pressed the blade harder, a thin line of blood welling on her cheek. "Don't you dare say I love you," I hissed. "Love doesn't crawl in the dark. Love doesn't laugh behind closed doors." Her tears mixed with blood, streaking down her face. She closed her eyes, whispering prayers I no longer believed in. I stepped back finally, lowering the knife. I didn't cut her, not yet. The anticipation was sweeter. Instead, I turned to Ethan. "Watch her," I said. "Watch your love costs." And then I dragged the blade across Anna's arm, slow and deliberate, her scream filling the basement, echoing off the concrete walls. Ethan roared, straining against the chains, his voice cracking with despair. "Stop! Stop! Take me, not her!" But I only smiled, because this was the revenge I had dreamed of. Their pain feeding each other, their love turning to ash before my eyes. By the time I stopped, the room reeked of blood and sweat. Anna sagged in the chair, sobbing softly, her arms streaked red. Ethan hung limp in the chains, his head bowed, dried blood caking his swollen face. I stood over them, the knife dangling in my hand, my breath slow and steady. "It's almost over," I said softly. "One more night, and then the scales will be balanced." I left them there, the bulb flickering above, their sobs following me up the stairs and out into the cold night air. The farmhouse loomed behind me like a tomb, and for the first time in years I felt almost alive. Almost. The farmhouse was silent when I returned the following night. No wind, no birds, just silence, thick and absolute, the kind of silence that makes you feel like the world is holding its breath. I stood in the doorway for a long time, listening. Then I descended the basement steps, each one creaking under my boots. The bulb flickered weakly, casting the room in a sickly yellow glow. Ethan hung limp in the chains, his head bowed, dried blood caking his swollen face. Anna sat slumped in the chair, her arms streaked red, her eyes hollow. When they heard me, they both stirred. Weak, broken sounds escaped their throats, pleas, whispers, prayers. I set the bag I was carrying on the table. The metallic clink of steel inside made them both flinch. "It's time," I said softly. Ethan lifted his head, his voice hoarse, shredded from days of screaming. "Daniel, please, just finish it." Anna shook her head, tears spilling. "No, no, don't! Please, I'll do anything. I stepped closer, crouched so my eyes met hers. "Anything?" She nodded furiously, her lips trembling. Yes, anything. I'll leave. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again, I swear." I tilted my head, studying her. For a moment, I almost believed her. Almost. But then I remembered the laughter I had heard that night, 2 years ago, the sound of her joy while I was downstairs carrying flowers for her. And my heart hardened to stone. I turned to Ethan. "You asked me to kill you last night, begged for it. But that would be mercy, and I don't deal in mercy." His bloodshot eyes glistened. Then what do you want from us? I smiled faintly. The truth. Anna sobbed. We've told you the truth, everything. Not everything, I whispered. I pulled a tape recorder from my bag, set it on the table, and clicked it on. The reels began to spin, the faint hiss of magnetic tape filling the air. You're going to confess, I said. Both of you. Every detail, every time, every lie you told me. You're going to speak it into the tape so the whole world will know what you did. Anna shook her head violently, panic flaring in her eyes. No, you can't! Ethan coughed, blood on his lips. Daniel, please don't do this to her. I leaned close, my voice low, sharp as a blade. I'm not doing anything to her. I'm giving her a chance to speak before I end her. Her sob broke the air. Ethan tried to lunge forward, but the chains held him fast. The tape hissed. The basement waited. It took hours. Hours of screaming, begging, breaking. But in the end, they confessed. Every word spilled from their mouths, raw and ugly. How they started before the wedding. How they laughed at me. How Anna told Ethan I was weak, that I would never know. How Ethan said I was too blind to see what was right in front of me. Each confession was another nail in the coffin of who I used to be.
When the tape was full, I clicked it off. The silence afterward was heavier than their screams. I set the recorder aside and drew the pistol from my bag. Anna's eyes widened, her whole body trembling. No, Daniel, please don't. Ethan thrashed, chains clanging. Shoot me! Shoot me! Not her! I looked at him, calm, steady. You'll get your turn. Then I turned to Anna. I raised the gun slowly, the barrel steady. Her voice cracked. I loved you, Daniel. I did. Once. I squeezed a trigger. The gunshot cracked like thunder. Her head snapped back, her body slumping lifeless in the chair, blood spraying the wall behind her. Ethan's scream was animal, raw, ripping through the basement like a storm. I lowered the gun, my ears ringing, my breath steady. I turned to him. You see, Ethan, I said softly, this is balance. This is justice. He sobbed, choking on his grief, his face twisted with agony. You monster! I stepped closer, crouched so we were face to face. Monster, I whispered. Maybe. But who made me this way? He closed his eyes, tears spilling, his lips trembling. I did. I smiled. Exactly. I pressed the barrel of the gun against his forehead. His breath hitched. His eyes fluttered open, meeting mine one last time. Do it, he whispered. And I did. The shot echoed, his body jerking once before hanging limp in the chains. The silence after was complete. No more sobs, no more begging, just silence. I stood in the middle of the basement, the gun heavy in my hand, the smell of blood thick in the air. 2 bodies, 2 betrayals answered. The scales were balanced. I left the farmhouse as dawn bled across the horizon. The woods were quiet, mist curling around the trees. Birds began to stir, singing their morning songs, indifferent to the carnage behind me. I drove back to town, the tape recorder on the passenger seat beside me. Their confessions, their truth. I didn't plan to hide, didn't plan to run. Hollowford would know what they had done.
and they would know what I had done in return. Because revenge, real revenge, isn't about escape. It's about making sure the world remembers. I don't know what happens next. Prison, death, maybe worse. But it doesn't matter. What matters is this: the betrayal is gone. The laughter is gone. And for the first time in years, the silence is mine.
If you're hearing this tape, then you know the story. You know what betrayal can do. You know what a man becomes when the people he loves carve him open and leave him to bleed. This isn't a warning. It isn't a plea. It's just the truth. And the truth is heavier than blood. And that was my story. A story carved from betrayal, sharpened by rage, and ended in silence. In the end, revenge gave me nothing but emptiness, but maybe that's all I ever deserved. Remember, trust can be broken in an instant, but the scars it leaves behind last forever. Thank you for walking with me through the shadows. If this story gripped you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Here, we bring you tales of horror, betrayal, and the darkest corners of the human soul. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never forget, the scariest stories are the ones that feel true.